Hi guys, what's up? Welcome back. Today you join me on a lovely sunny British day, although it is freezing, in the 2023 Kia Soul EV. Now I know what you're thinking. The first thing you think when you look at this car is, that is a cube. And you're right, I think actually it's hideous. But I'm going to tell you why it's really charmed me over the last few days and why I've grown quite fond of it. Now here in the UK, this newer version of the Kia Soul actually only comes as an EV now. You can't get a hybrid or a internal combustion engine variant, which is absolutely fine. It's also quite easy to choose from the range as well, because there's only two models. The first one being the Urban, which gets a smaller battery pack, so it's a 39 kilowatt hour battery with a range of about 171 miles. 134 horsepower, and that starts from around £33,000. But there is also a limitation with that one. If you're going around town and just using it for that, then the range probably won't bother you, but the 50 kilowatt charging might, so you can't actually get the best fast charge out of it. This one that I'm sitting in here is the top of the range model. This one's called the Explore. It has 201 brake horsepower and a range of 280 miles combined, which is quite impressive really. It also charges up to about 77 kilowatts, which isn't the fastest available. Of course, a lot of cars do 100 now and kind of beyond, but it's not too bad. Sitting in a service station, you can get this thing to charge on a fast charger in around 45 minutes from 10 to 80%, which isn't the best. There's a lot of cars now that can do it in sort of 20 minutes to half an hour, but if you've got a bit of time to kill and you don't mind grabbing some food, then not really the end of the world. Both models have around 291 foot-pounds of torque and come with a lot of tech as standard, as you get in all of these Kias and Hyundais. So the base model Urban does get you a digital display, and it also gets you an 8-inch touchscreen, which isn't as good as the 10.25 unit that I've got here, but it still gets you most of the basic driver assist features as well, in terms of a smart active cruise control and also lane keep assist and things like that. But this top of the range model takes it one step further and gives you blind spot assist, so it will steer you back into lane and alert you if it thinks you're going to hit something in the blind spot. And it also has the active highway assist, which I think is a fantastic feature on these Kias. All you do is press one button on the steering wheel and it will automatically start steering you in lane. You just got to keep hands on the wheel, and it takes such a lot of effort out of driving long journeys on the motorway, and really helped me on a long trip the other day. The base model doesn't get you leather or adjustable seats either, in terms of the electric lumbar and things like that, and it also doesn't get you heated seats or steering wheel, but it does have quite a quirky inside, whereas this top of the range model, even though it has those extra features, looks a little bit bland. But yeah, 39 grand for this model without any options, and I think that's quite steep when you consider where the Kia Niro is priced, also the Kia Sportage if you're looking for something with a hybrid, and also some other cars that are significantly cheaper like the MG4, or realistically at 39 to 40 grand, that's almost Tesla Model 3 money, which granted isn't the same in terms of interior space as this, but I think is a bit of a nicer product overall. Now let's get the admin out of the way and talk about the looks of this thing a little bit. Unfortunately, I don't gel with it. Some people think it's quirky. I think it looks a bit like Postman Pat's van. I think the styling is all wrong. I think from behind it looks like a Toyota Aygo that's having some trouble with water retention after taking steroids. And from the front, I think it tries to be a Range Rover, but falls really short and just looks a little bit awkward. And yeah, overall, I understand why they've gone for the boxy shape. It's quite practical. But personally, I prefer the Kia Niro. I think it's styled a lot better personally. Also, what is this colour combination about? The white with the red roof. This is like one of their top of the range models and an optional paint, I believe, as well. And yeah, I mean, I've driven it probably over 500 miles this week and shown it to all sorts of people. And the universal agreement was that it's really ugly and that people just don't understand the styling at all, and they don't like the colour combination either. And I would be inclined to agree, to be honest. I think it looks even worse with these little wheels on, although they are quite comfortable. But let's gloss over all that, shall we? Let's not get bogged down with the technicalities of what I'm going to have to do to wash out my eyes after looking at the thing. Let's talk about what it is like as an experience and where it sits on the market. And this is where it's quite interesting, because it's kind of a blend of the old and the new Kia platform. So inside you see that there's some elements in here which are similar styling wise to the older Kia models, such as the older Niro, for example. But also there's some design elements like in the doors that are like from the EV6, and you get all the modern screen and that kind of thing. So it's not all bad. In terms of the underpinnings, the chassis is effectively based on the old Niro and Hyundai Kona package. And you kind of feel that in the way that it drives. It doesn't feel quite as sharp as a slightly more modern Kia chassis, but also it does the trick. It's not what I would call disappointing in the slightest. In terms of exterior features, you do get LED lights all round, and the actual size of it is quite practical. It's actually pretty much on par with a normal hatchback. It's just a lot taller, so you get this nice raised driving position. And I have to say the driving position is actually fantastic in this. I've got loads of visibility despite some kind of thick C-pillars. I can still see everything perfectly. Blind spot assist works absolutely great and gives you a warning in the mirrors, but unfortunately the display in front of me isn't up to scratch with the newer Kia models or the more expensive ones. It doesn't have the blind spot cameras in the screen in front of me here, so you do get some basic information there, such as your drive information, traffic time recognition. It shows you your kind of battery temperature, range, speed, all that usual stuff, but nothing too intense in terms of, like, there's no virtual cockpit maps or anything like that. It's quite basic, but it kind of shows you everything you need to. When you put it in sport mode, it will come up with a torque meter, which is good fun to play with. And when you're in eco mode, it gives you information about extra miles you're adding to the charge with the regen braking and things like that, which is quite pleasant. I've just got good visibility of the corners of the car. Like, I can see where the front corners are and the back corners are kind of right there in my line of sight. And I know that the back of the car is pretty much flat, so you don't really have like a weird hatch to contend with. And that kind of makes it really easy to place, especially when parking the thing. So actually, for a lot of people who just want a slightly higher car, a bit like a crossover, this kind of fits the bill in a way, because it's almost like an SUV shape, but in a hatchback format. Stepping inside, you do get all the usual niceties that you get in a Kia. For example, the infotainment screen here, I've got the 10.25 in this higher model, and it comes with Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, a nice sound system. And the sound system's kind of interesting actually, because it's got these tweeters that are kind of firing towards you out of the dash near the air vents, kind of like you'd experience in like an actual stereo setup. So it kind of makes for this nice immersive experience, but it is a little bit of getting used to, considering most cars have it either in the pillar or in the doors. And it's a bit odd, but you do get used to it, and I do think it sounds quite good. It's not the best system I've ever heard in a car of this price range by any stretch, but you can dial the EQ to make it a bit more bassy and a bit more clear, but it's not the best, but it's certainly adequate, and you wouldn't be disappointed with it coming from any other basic car. But apart from that, you get all of the usual niceties that you find, like the Kia drive profiles. When you get in it, you can select someone's drive profile with all of their settings pre-configured, and you can also do things like turn on quiet mode so that the people in the back who are asleep aren't disturbed. It turns off the speakers back there. And other little things like voice memos, for example, you can store them in the car so that when you get home you can jot things down. It's just got nice little things like that. When you drive through a tunnel, it will shut off the air vents so that you don't get pollution in the car, and it even goes to the length of when you put the washer fluid on and spray the windscreen, it will stop the vents opening up so that you don't get the scent of the Halford's very berry inside the car. Overall, it's not the prettiest system in the world, but it gets the job done. It's nice and responsive. It's never crashed on me. I find it to be really reliable, and you do get updates on there. It's just a shame that the inbuilt navigation isn't quite as effective at dealing with electric cars like charging points like Teslas are. But at the end of the day, you're going to be using your phone with any of your built-in apps anyway. You also do have physical climate controls, which are super easy to use, and I really like those. And you also get kind of everything placed exactly where you want it to be. I can rest my elbow nicely here, I can rest my elbow nicely here, and I can get the perfect driving position that I really enjoy. This one has the electric lumbar support and a really supportive seat. The only thing I don't like, the headrest isn't quite as adjustable as I'd like it to be. It's a bit far forward, but that seems to be a bit of a Kia thing, and you do soon get used to it. I've got dodgy posture anyway, so that doesn't help. There are squishy materials up the top, although scratchy plastics elsewhere on the dash. But at the end of the day, that's kind of what you come to expect for a car in this price range now, and it's still pleasant enough to live with day to day. It's just not as exciting as some of the other interiors in this price range. It doesn't look cheap, but it also doesn't feel premium, if that makes sense. What I do like as well is right down by the gear selector, you've got the rotary gear select, and you've got simple controls down there for your heated steering wheel, which is absolutely lovely, and heated seats, drive mode, etc. Turning circle isn't brilliant, to be honest, but because it's got quite a short wheelbase, it's not really difficult to live with. You also get things like a high wattage charging point, USB-A, USB-C, you get some USB-Cs in the back, so it's nice and modern for all your charging, all your passengers. In terms of space in here, it's quite an interesting one, because it's still a relatively narrow car, like a hatchback, right? But you do have that kind of really extended headroom. I mean, I'm 6 foot, and look at all this gap I've got here. And in the back as well, you've got loads and loads of headroom. But again, the Niro, for example, is a little bit wider, so you get a bit of a nicer seating position back there, especially if you've got 3 adults in the back. Also, one thing I don't like is that you sit in a bit of a position where there's not much thigh support. So for a long journey, if you've got long legs, it might not be the best experience. It would be a bit better if the seats were kind of a bit further down so that you could kind of have that raised thigh support like you can with this electric adjustment in the front. It's also got the other usual practicalities as well. You've got ISOFIX points back there. They're kind of the squish between the leather kind, which is a shame they've not got the flip outs, but it is what it is. I've got a nice big size door bin. I've got nice cup holders that fit my Starbucks in, which actually are pretty good because they have the ridges in that conform to the shape of the cup that you're using. It's just practical. Let's just do a little test, because in eco mode, this car is quite sluggish off the line. You can tell the regen braking is really strong there. So if I just plant it off the line, I mean, it kicks in, it feels all right, but it's not going to blow your socks off. But if I then brake, and I can feel the regen kicking in, but the brakes thankfully aren't too spongy in this, they're quite progressive, which is nice for an EV. If I now switch this into sport mode and do the same thing, the throttle response is much more instant and it pushes a lot harder, and you can see that torque gauge fly up, and it really makes a big difference. Now, in terms of the actual driving, you've got a few different modes, which is like just a common thing. So I'm in sport mode. I'm going to fling it around this roundabout, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about how this car drives. Right, I'm off. Wheel spin is always apparent. It really struggles to put the power down, this car. And I've got a little bit of understeer around there, but whoa, that actually stayed pretty planted, more so than I thought it would, to be fair. They've also changed this lane keep assist, and it definitely seems a little bit better in these more modern iterations. I don't know whether it's a software tweak or what, but in sort of slightly older cars, it would always try and kill me when I'm around town and stuff and pull me into different lanes. But this, it kind of seems to behave itself a lot more. I think they've really improved it over time. It's actually very useful now, and it doesn't really interfere with you as much as it used to. So in sport mode, it's a lot more free. It feels like a lot more like a normal car, and I've got that kind of instant throttle response when I plant it, which is really good. And the regen you can control on the paddles, which I've always loved. So for example, I'm driving along now, I'm in level 1, which feels very much like a normal car, but if I pull on the paddle on the right, it goes down to level 0, which is completely free, and I now have to use the brake almost like a normal car. But if I pull the paddle down and go to level 2, for example, I can instantly feel the regen braking kicking in, and I now have to use the throttle pedal a lot more to keep me at speed. And that means when I let off, the regen braking kicks in, it slows me down a lot faster, and it starts to charge the car. If I go all the way to level 3, it's almost like one pedal driving, but it doesn't bring you to a complete stop like with the iPedal mode in the Kia EV6 or some other EVs, which is a shame. But you can use the left paddle and just hold it, and that will brake you to a complete stop. So in traffic, you can still get away with not using the brake pedal at all if you want to, but it is a bit of a weird way to drive. It would be nice if it did include a one pedal driving mode, but I still love the fact that you can do this on the fly. You know, I'm in level 3 right now, and if I let off, the car starts braking quite heavily for me. But then if I just flip the paddle up to level 0, now if I let off, the car stays exactly at speed, and I have to use the brake myself. So it's really nice to have that control at your fingertips, and I think Kia's implementation is one of the best in the market at this. In terms of driving it on the highway, the thing I would complain about is a bit of road noise, and you also get a lot of wind whistle from this cuboid shape here. It's just a bit of an odd pillar setup and a bit of a weird shaped window, I think, and potentially not the thickest glass either. So you can see where they've cut corners there, being a slightly cheaper EV. But you know what? It's okay, and I really forgive it, because the actual experience, I did a long trip in this the other day. I spent 4 hours each way on the motorway going up and down the M1, and having it with the highway assist turned on, it makes driving a breeze. It keeps you in lane, it'll warn you about anything that's going to try and hit you in your blind spot, and it's just a really smooth experience, and I can't fault it for that at all. The combined range of 280 is pretty good too. It's just a shame that that charging isn't a little bit faster, because I spent quite a bit of time sat in services. Round town it's pleasant. EVs are always lovely and smooth round town, and this one is no exception. The brakes are quite compliant, the suspension also. In terms of boot space, it's a bit of a weird setup, to be honest. Like, it's got this piddly little parcel shelf which doesn't do much, and because it's very kind of flat and cube shaped at the back, it's very tall but not very deep. But once you fold the seats down, you've actually got a really generous bit of space, and under the floor as well, it is adjustable, and you can fit your parcel shelf under there, which is really nice, and also all of your charging cables, so you don't really have to worry about messing around with that. I think it might be a bit deceiving though. I think from outside it looks like the cargo space is really excessive just because of the size of the thing. But as I say, the actual kind of length of the car is not particularly big in comparison to a normal hatchback. So really what you're getting with this package isn't length, it's height. Of course, the suspension is quite nice. You do get pretty good road clearance as well, and so going over bumps like this, you don't really feel too much. It's still quite firm being an EV, but it doesn't feel like absolutely solid like something like an EV6. Like this is kind of a bit more akin to a normal car, but of course it is quite heavy, so there's a lot of weight to stop. It also just concerns me a little bit, this power delivery, because it's front wheel drive. You just get into this weird situation, it just wheel spins all the time. Like, I'll try and demonstrate it as we come up to a different exit here, but it just, every time you put your foot down coming out of a corner, no matter what the conditions, it just spins. And that's with traction control switched on as well. So I'm going around this big roundabout here. You see? Did you hear that? It spun up. Just a little blip of the throttle. It is a little bit greasy here, but not too bad. Doesn't understeer as much as I thought it would, but if I see if I just plant it, spins up. Could be tyres, I suppose, but here we go, let's go again. Every time without fail. And again. But then there we go. Woo! It's a big heavy old beast, but it's quite nice when you get it hustling. It's quite rapid. I actually quite not like the noise of the electric motors in this one as well. Sounds like a spaceship. That wheel spin though. But then I'd rather that than, you know, an inexperienced driver getting a rear wheel drive car like a GT6 for example and plant it and spin the tail out and wrap it around a post. So I suppose this is probably better than that, isn't it? And of course electric torque on the pickup uphill, look, fantastic. So yeah, I don't know, it's a funny one. I do like it, I like living with it. I've done long journeys in it. I like the amount of space that I've got in here, the headroom, I've got sort of elbow room to put my elbows down. It's not too difficult to park because it's a short wheelbase, and you've got loads of headroom in the back, you've got space for the kids, you've got all of the Kia tech that everyone's grown to know and love, and obviously it's reliable as well. Kias are known for their reliability. Not only that, but you've got that 7-year, 100,000 mile warranty. Like, how can you go wrong with that? It's really good in a new car. Not many manufacturers still offer that kind of protection when you buy new. But 39 grand for this top spec model, and I would recommend it for the extra kit that you get in it. But it's just a lot of money. Like, there's alternatives out there for that sort of cash that look a lot better and also just feel that little bit nicer inside and just have more gadgets and gizmos. Like, don't get me wrong, you've got everything you might need on this, but it doesn't excite me. You know, I've loved it. I've loved having it for this week, and as much as I wish it charged a little bit faster, the range has been decent. It's been really pleasant, and everything is where I want it to be. The heated steering wheel is lovely in this weather, and I'm just impressed overall with the kind of the fit and finish of stuff, even though it's kind of on the cheaper end of the materials side. I just think the price is wrong, and it's a shame, because that means that I can't really forgive it for its looks. Although I would say, if you're not too bothered about that and you're really thinking of just the practicality of it, you want something that's small on the road but just easy to step in and out of. Maybe, you know, you're thinking of buying if you're slightly older, you know, or if you've got some sort of disability that makes it more difficult to get in and out of a lower car, or if you just need that kind of extra height in the back. Like, this would probably be the ideal sort of car to fit something like a wheelchair in the back of, or some bikes or something like that with the seats folded down. It's not quite as good as an estate in terms of the actual cargo area space, but the height really makes a difference for certain things. So maybe that's something to consider. For me, I wouldn't buy one. I probably wouldn't recommend one, because if it were me and I still wanted to go with a Kia, I'd just get a Niro EV instead. It's a similar sort of price and just a nicer car. And for me personally, where I'm not quite ready to switch to full EV yet, I'd probably go for a Sportage hybrid, because that is really lovely. But that doesn't mean to say there's not a place for this. When I first saw one, and I was at a press event and I saw this against all their other cars, and I said to him, what's the point? But I kind of get it. I do kind of get it. That being said though, I live in London, I've been to Birmingham and back in the last sort of 2-3 days and spent quite a bit of time up there. I've not seen another one of these, and that doesn't bode well with me. For me, I think that's probably because they're not very well liked, or people don't think that they're really a good option, not because they're rare and unique. But yeah, you know, it's not a bad car by any stretch. It is lovely to live with. So if it's your thing, more power to you. And I definitely wouldn't say there's anything wrong with it in terms of your day-to-day driving. And there's just something so intuitive about these Kias when you get in them, like the paddle shift to control the throttle response and the regen braking and the different drive modes that just make sense. There's no faffing about. Once you've spent a little bit of time in it, you just know what's going to go on. I can't help but feel like a little bit of shame getting out of it though. People look at it a bit weird, and it probably doesn't help that I've got a number plate on this one that says Kia Soul, because I look like a Kia Soul enthusiast, if there is such a thing. But I've got to give props to the Kia media team for always being very inventive with their number plates. And once again, I'd love to thank them for being so cooperative and always sending me out their stuff for review. I will never fail to recommend a Kia product because I just think they are a great all-round package for people who just want a car with modern, useful features that's really easy to live with day to day, that's going to be nice and reliable. For me as a car enthusiast, this isn't for me, but there's definitely a market for it, and I encourage you to go and check them out, whether it be this one or whether it be the equivalent Niro. And whilst everyone who's got in it have said, "Ooh, what's that?" after 10 minutes of me driving them around, they say how lovely and smooth it is and how it feels really comfortable on the road, how the suspension's really compliant, and how the sound system sounds good. So what more could you want? Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Postman Pat, and his black and white cat.